Waiting for my husband at the airport, a young crying beggar grabbed my arm. "I need you to listen. Don't board." I tried to pull away. She said, "In 3 hours you'll have a choice. Choose the unexpected." I thought she was crazy, but 3 hours later, I received a call that, "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached." My name is Gretchen, and I'm 57 years old. I thought I knew everything about my life until a crying beggar at the airport changed everything in 3 hours. I was sitting in Terminal B at Reagan National Airport, nervously checking my watch for the third time in 10 minutes. Damon's flight from Chicago was delayed again, and I could feel that familiar knot forming in my stomach. 25 years of marriage, and I still got anxious when his business trips ran longer than expected. The airport smelled like stale coffee and jet fuel. Overhead announcements echoed through the terminal, mixing with the constant hum of travelers dragging their luggage across the polished floors. The fluorescent lights cast everything in a cold, sterile glow that made everyone look tired and pale. I was reading the same page of my book for the 4th time when she appeared. She couldn't have been more than 20, with tangled brown hair and clothes that had seen better days. Her face was streaked with tears, and she was clutching a crumpled piece of paper in her trembling hands. Most people were giving her a wide berth, the way you do with someone who clearly doesn't belong in an airport terminal. But she walked straight toward me. "Excuse me," she said, her voice shaky but urgent. "Are you Gretchen? Gretchen Morrison?" I looked up from my book, startled. How did this stranger know my name? I clutched my purse a little tighter and gave her a cautious nod. "I need you to listen to me," she continued, glancing around nervously as if someone might be watching. "This is going to sound crazy, but you can't board that plane with your husband." A chill ran down my spine. Damon and I weren't even flying anywhere together today. He was just returning from a 3-day business conference in Chicago. I was only here to pick him up. "I'm sorry, but I think you have me confused with someone else," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The girl shook her head violently. "No, you're Gretchen Morrison. You live on Maple Street in Arlington. You drive a blue Honda Accord. Your husband is Damon, and he told you he's been at a pharmaceutical conference in Chicago." My blood turned to ice. This stranger knew details about my life that she had no business knowing. I stood up slowly, my book falling to the floor. "Who are you? How do you know these things?" She grabbed my arm with surprising strength. Her fingers were ice cold, and I could feel them trembling through the thin fabric of my sweater. "Listen to me carefully," she whispered, her eyes wide and desperate. "In 3 hours, you're going to receive a phone call. When that call comes, you'll have a choice to make. You can choose to believe what you've always believed, or you can choose the unexpected." I tried to pull away from her grip, but she held on tighter. "I don't understand what you're talking about. Please let go of me. Promise me," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks now. "When that call comes, choose the unexpected. Don't let him convince you otherwise. Don't let him make you believe his lies anymore." Finally, I managed to break free from her grasp. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "I'm calling security," I said, reaching for my phone. But when I looked up, she was gone, vanished into the crowd as if she had never been there at all. The only evidence of our encounter was the lingering smell of desperation, and the way my arm still tingled where she had grabbed me. I stood there for several minutes, scanning the terminal for any sign of her. Nothing, just the usual mix of business travelers, families with young children, and teenagers glued to their phones. I tried to shake it off. Maybe she was mentally ill. Maybe it was some kind of scam. People did strange things in airports all the time, but those details she knew about my life. That wasn't random. That was specific, personal information. When Damon's flight finally arrived 30 minutes later, I was still rattled. I watched him walk through the gate with his familiar, confident stride, pulling his black roller bag behind him. He looked tired, the way he always did after these conferences, but he smiled when he saw me. "Hey, beautiful," he said, kissing my cheek. His skin felt cold from the airplane's air conditioning, and he smelled like coffee and airplane air. "Sorry about the delay. Weather in Chicago was terrible. It's fine, I said, but my voice sounded strange even to my own ears. As we walked toward the parking garage, I found myself studying his face. After 25 years, I knew every line, every expression. But now I was looking for something different. Signs of deception, guilt, anything that might explain the encounter with that strange girl. Everything okay? Damon asked as we reached the car. You seem distracted. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to tell him about the girl, but another part held back. What would I say? That a homeless stranger knew our personal information and warned me about some mysterious phone call. It sounded insane, even in my own head. Just tired, I said instead. How was the conference? He launched into his usual post-trip report as I drove us home through the familiar streets of Arlington. New pharmaceutical regulations, networking opportunities, potential clients, the same topics he always discussed after these business trips. But something felt different this time. Maybe it was the girl's warning echoing in my head, but I found myself paying closer attention to his words. Was he being more vague than usual? Were there gaps in his timeline that I had never noticed before? When we got home, Damon went straight to our bedroom to unpack. I could hear him moving around upstairs, opening drawers, hanging up clothes, normal post-trip activities. I made coffee and sat at our kitchen table, staring out the window at our small backyard. The afternoon sun was filtering through the oak tree we had planted on our 10th anniversary, casting dancing shadows across the lawn. 3 hours. The girl had said 3 hours. I looked at the clock on the microwave. It was 2:15 in the afternoon. That meant the call would come around 5:15, if the girl was right about anything. But that was ridiculous. Random strangers don't predict phone calls. This was all some kind of coincidence or misunderstanding. I tried to focus on normal things. I started dinner preparations, sorting through mail, planning my week. But every few minutes my eyes would drift to that clock. 2:30, 2:45, 3 o'clock. Damon came downstairs around 3:30, having changed into his comfortable weekend clothes. He kissed the top of my head as he passed by to pour himself a cup of coffee. "Smells good in here," he said, referring to the pot roast I had started. "I missed your cooking. The hotel restaurant wasn't good?" "Hotel food is hotel food," he said with a shrug. "Nothing beats a home-cooked meal." We sat together at the kitchen table, sharing comfortable silence the way couples do after decades together. But I kept stealing glances at him, searching for something I couldn't quite name. 4 o'clock came and went, then 4:30. I was starting to feel foolish for giving any credence to a stranger's ramblings. But at exactly 5:14, my phone rang. I looked at the caller ID. Unknown number. My hands started trembling as I remembered the girl's words. "In 3 hours, you're going to receive a phone call. Aren't you going to answer that?" Damon asked, looking up from his newspaper. I stared at the phone, my heart racing. "Choose the unexpected," the girl had said. But what did that even mean? The phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. Same unknown number. This time, I answered. "Mrs. Morrison?" The voice was professional, clinical. "This is Dr. Sarah Chen from George Washington University Hospital. I'm calling about your husband, Damon Morrison." My world tilted on its axis. Damon was sitting right across from me, alive and well, reading the sports section. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "There must be some mistake. My husband is right here." "Ma'am, I understand this must be confusing, but Mr. Morrison was brought into our emergency room approximately 2 hours ago following a car accident. He's listed you as his emergency contact." I looked at Damon, who was now watching me with a puzzled expression. He mouthed, "Who is it?" But I couldn't respond. My throat had closed up completely. "Mrs. Morrison, are you still there?" "Yes," I managed to say, "but I think there's been a mistake." "What? What does this person look like?" "Male, approximately 60 years old, brown hair with gray at the temples, about 6 feet tall. He had identification showing Damon Morrison, and his insurance card lists you as his spouse." Every detail matched my husband perfectly. The husband who was sitting across from me, very much not in a hospital emergency room. I'll be right there, I said, ending the call. Damon set down his newspaper. What was that about? You look like you've seen a ghost. I stared at him, the girl's warning ringing in my ears. Choose the unexpected. Don't let him convince you to believe his lies anymore. For the first time in 25 years, I looked at my husband and wondered if I knew him at all. The drive to George Washington University Hospital felt like moving through thick fog. Every red light, every turn, gave me more time to think about the impossibility of what was happening. How could my husband be in two places at once? Damon had insisted on coming with me, of course. There's obviously been some kind of mix-up with the identification, he said, as we walked through the hospital's automatic doors. We'll get this sorted out quickly. But something in his voice didn't sound quite right. There was a tightness there, a forced casualness that I had never noticed before. The emergency room smelled like disinfectant and anxiety. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the faces of people waiting in plastic chairs. A television mounted in the corner played the evening news with the sound turned down. At the reception desk, a tired-looking woman in scrubs looked up our information. Morrison, she said, typing on her keyboard. Yes, he's in room 12. Are you his wife? I think there's been a mistake, Damon said, stepping forward with his confident smile. I'm Damon Morrison, and this is my wife. As you can see, I'm perfectly fine. The receptionist frowned, looking back and forth between her computer screen and Damon's face. That's odd. Let me get Dr. Chen. Dr. Chen appeared a few minutes later, a petite woman with tired eyes and graying hair pulled back in a ponytail. When she saw Damon, her expression shifted from confusion to something that looked almost like recognition. Mr. Morrison, she said slowly, I wasn't expecting to see you walking around. There's been some kind of mistake, Damon said again, but I noticed his hands were trembling slightly. Someone else must be using my identification. Dr. Chen studied his face for a long moment. Could you follow me, please? Both of you. She led us down a hallway that smelled like industrial cleaning supplies and fear. Our footsteps echoed off the linoleum floors. Through open doorways, I caught glimpses of people connected to machines, families holding vigil, the machinery of life and death humming quietly in the background. Room 12 was at the end of the hall. Dr. Chen paused with her hand on the door handle. I should prepare you, she said to me. The patient has facial injuries from the accident. But his identification was very clear, and when we called the emergency contact number, she pushed open the door. The man in the hospital bed was connected to several machines that beeped softly in the quiet room. His face was swollen and bruised, making it difficult to see his features clearly. But even with the injuries, even with the medical equipment surrounding him, I could see enough. It wasn't Damon, but it also wasn't not Damon, if that made any sense. The height was right. The build was right. Even the hair color, what I could see of it beneath the bandages, was the same shade of brown with gray at the temples. I told you it was a mistake, Damon said, but his voice sounded hollow. That's not me. Dr. Chen was watching him carefully. The strange thing is, this patient's wallet contained a driver's license with your name and address, his insurance cards, his credit cards, even a library card, all with your information. My legs felt weak. I grabbed onto the doorframe to steady myself. That's identity theft, Damon said quickly. Someone must have stolen my information. But Dr. Chen wasn't finished. What's really puzzling is that when we ran his fingerprints through the system, they came back as Damon Morrison as well. The room went deadly quiet, except for the steady beeping of the heart monitor. That's impossible, I whispered. Dr. Chen nodded. That's what I thought too, which is why I'm very confused to see you here, Mr. Morrison, apparently uninjured. I looked back and forth between the man in the bed and my husband standing beside me. Two people who couldn't possibly both be Damon Morrison, yet somehow they were. Could we have a moment alone? I asked Dr. Chen, my voice barely audible. She nodded and stepped out, closing the door behind her with a soft click. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear my own heartbeat, the whisper of the ventilation system, the distant sounds of the hospital continuing its work around us. Gretchen. Damon said softly. I know this looks strange, but there has to be an explanation. I turned to look at him, really look at him. After 25 years, I knew every line of his face, every expression he made when he was nervous or tired or trying to convince me of something. And right now, he was definitely trying to convince me of something. Who is he? I asked, pointing toward the bed. I have no idea. Some criminal who stole my identity, apparently. But even as he said it, I could see the lie in his eyes. The way he wouldn't quite meet my gaze. The way his hands kept fidgeting with his wedding ring. Your fingerprints, Damon. Dr. Chen said his fingerprints match yours. That's impossible. She must be mistaken. I walked closer to the bed, studying the injured man's face despite the swelling and bruises. There was something familiar about the shape of his nose, the set of his jawline. How long have you been living a double life? I asked quietly, not turning around. The silence behind me stretched so long that I thought maybe he had left the room. But when I finally turned around, he was still there, his face pale and his hands clenched into fists. I don't know what you're talking about. The girl at the airport, I said, the pieces starting to fall into place. She knew you'd been lying to me. She knew about this somehow. Damon's face went even paler. What girl at the airport? A young woman, maybe 20 years old. She warned me about a phone call. She said when it came, I should choose the unexpected instead of believing your lies. For the first time since I'd known him, Damon looked genuinely afraid. Gretchen, listen to me, he said, taking a step toward me. Whatever someone told you, whatever you think you know, it's not what it seems. Then explain it to me, I said, crossing my arms. Explain how there are two Damon Morrisons. Explain how this man has your fingerprints, your identification, your emergency contact information. Explain how a stranger at the airport knew about phone calls that wouldn't happen for 3 hours. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For 25 years, Damon had always had an answer for everything. He was the kind of man who could talk his way out of any situation, who could make you believe that black was white if it served his purposes. But now, for the first time, he had nothing to say. I need some air, I said, moving toward the door. I'll be in the parking lot when you're ready to tell me the truth. I left him standing there in that hospital room with machines beeping around us and walked out into the hallway. My legs felt like rubber, and my hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the wall to keep from falling. At the elevator, I pressed the button and waited. The girl's words echoed in my head. Choose the unexpected. Don't let him make you believe his lies anymore. What lies? How long had he been lying to me? And more importantly, what other truths was I about to discover? The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and I stepped inside. As the doors closed behind me, I caught a glimpse of Damon through the window of room 12. He was standing over the bed, staring down at the injured man who somehow shared his identity. And for just a moment, before the elevator descended and took him out of view, I could have sworn I saw him reach out and touch the other man's hand, like he was saying goodbye to someone he cared about. The elevator descended toward the ground floor, carrying me away from the hospital room where my husband stood with another version of himself. But I wasn't running away from the truth anymore. I was running toward it, even if it destroyed everything I thought I knew about my life. Because the girl at the airport had been right about one thing. In 3 hours, I had received a phone call that changed everything, and now I was choosing the unexpected, no matter how much it might hurt. By the time the elevator doors opened in the lobby, I had made my decision. I was going to find out who my husband really was, even if it meant discovering that I had never known him at all. I didn't go to the parking lot. Instead, I found myself sitting in the hospital cafeteria, staring at a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the smell of institutional food mixed with disinfectant created an atmosphere of surreal normalcy. My phone had been buzzing with text messages from Damon for the past hour. Where are you? We need to talk. Please come back. I ignored them all. Instead, I kept thinking about that moment in the elevator when I saw him touch the other man's hand. There had been tenderness in that gesture, familiarity. You don't touch a stranger like that. especially not a stranger who's supposedly stolen your identity. Excuse me, are you Mrs. Morrison? I looked up to see a woman about my age, maybe a few years younger, with shoulder-length blonde hair and worried blue eyes. She was clutching a leather purse against her chest like a shield. Yes, I said cautiously. Do I know you? She sat down across from me without being invited, her hands trembling as she placed them on the table. My name is Linda. Linda Morrison. The name hit me like a physical blow. Morrison. She was claiming to be a Morrison, too. I think we need to talk, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. About Damon. My mouth went dry. I don't understand. Linda reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph. She slid it across the table toward me. It was a family photo. Linda, the man currently lying unconscious in room 12, and 2 children. A boy who looked about 15 and a girl who appeared to be around 12. The man in the photo was definitely the patient upstairs, but he was also definitely Damon. The same smile, the same way of holding his shoulders, even the same small scar above his left eyebrow that he'd gotten in college playing baseball. How long? I asked, my voice cracking. 15 years, Linda said, tears starting to fall down her cheeks. We've been married for 15 years. He told me his first wife died in a car accident. He said her name was Patricia, not Gretchen. I felt like I was drowning. 25 years of marriage, and for the last 15 of them, my husband had been living an entirely separate life with another family. The children, I managed to say. Are they? His? Yes. Sarah is 20, and Michael is 17 now. Linda wiped her eyes with a tissue from her purse. Sarah was the one who found out about you. My heart stopped. Sarah? She's been trying to figure out why her father disappears for days at a time, why he's so secretive about his work trips. She hired a private investigator with money she saved from her job. The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. The girl at the airport, she said her name was Sarah. Linda nodded miserably. She wanted to warn you before you went on that trip to Hawaii that Damon had planned. She said you deserved to know the truth before you signed any more legal documents. What legal documents? The power of attorney papers he's been asking you to sign. Sarah found out he needs access to your accounts to pay for Michael's college tuition. Our savings are almost gone. I felt sick. For months, Damon had been pressuring me to sign a power of attorney, claiming it was just for estate planning purposes. He said it would make things easier if something ever happened to him during one of his business trips. He's been using my money to support your family. Linda's face crumpled with shame. I didn't know about you until 3 days ago when Sarah told me what she'd discovered. I thought the money was coming from his pharmaceutical sales job. I thought we were living on his income. I stared at the family photo, studying the faces of these children who were apparently my husband's other family. Sarah, the girl from the airport, had her father's eyes, but a determined set to her jaw that reminded me of myself at that age. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because it's not right, Linda said firmly. What he's done to both of us isn't right. And because... She hesitated, then pulled out another photo. This one showed Damon, the Damon I knew, the one I lived with, standing outside a small house I'd never seen before. He was holding hands with a woman who looked nothing like either Linda or me. She was younger, maybe in her 30s, with dark hair and a bright smile. There's someone else, Linda said quietly. Sarah thinks there might be a third family. The cafeteria around us seemed to blur and tilt. I gripped the edge of the table to keep from falling out of my chair. How many lives is he living? I whispered. We don't know. But Sarah found evidence of at least 3 different identities, 3 different addresses, 3 different families. I thought about all those business trips over the years. Chicago every month, sometimes Denver, occasionally Phoenix. I had never questioned them because Damon worked in pharmaceutical sales, and it made sense that he would need to travel to meet with clients. But what if there were no clients? What if each trip was just him cycling between his different wives, his different lives? The man upstairs, I said, looking toward the ceiling as if I could see through to room 12. That's really him, isn't it? Not some stranger with stolen identification. Linda nodded. That's my husband, the father of my children. And apparently, He's your husband, too. We sat in silence for several minutes, both of us trying to process the magnitude of the deception. Around us, hospital staff moved through their routines, families waited for news about their loved ones, and life continued as if the world hadn't just tilted off its axis. "What do we do now?" I finally asked. Linda reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were cold but steady. "We find out the truth," she said. "All of it. Sarah has been keeping detailed records of everything she's discovered. Names, addresses, bank account numbers. She wants to meet with you." "Where?" "Tomorrow morning. There's a coffee shop on King Street in Alexandria called The Daily Grind. 10 o'clock. I nodded, even though part of me wanted to run away from all of this. Go home. Pretend I'd never received that phone call, never met the girl at the airport, never discovered that my entire marriage was built on lies. But I couldn't unknow what I now knew, and more importantly, I couldn't let him continue to hurt other people the way he'd hurt Linda and me. "There's something else," Linda said, her voice dropping even lower. "Sarah thinks he might be planning to disappear completely. She found evidence that he's been moving money offshore, selling properties we didn't know he owned." "What does that mean?" "It means he might be planning to abandon all of us, take whatever money he's accumulated from his different lives, and start over somewhere else." The thought made my stomach lurch. After 25 years, was Damon really planning to just vanish? Leave me with nothing but questions and debt? My phone buzzed again. Another text from Damon. "Gretchen, please. Come back to the hospital. We need to figure this out together." I showed the message to Linda, and she let out a bitter laugh. "He's probably panicking right now," she said, "wondering how much you know, trying to figure out how to spin this. Should I go back?" "Not yet. Let him wonder. Let him worry." Linda gathered up the photos and put them back in her purse. "Tomorrow, after you meet with Sarah, you'll have all the information you need. Then you can decide how you want to handle this." We exchanged phone numbers and agreed to stay in touch. As Linda walked away, I watched her go and wondered how many other women like us there were. How many other families had Damon built his lies upon? I finally left the hospital around 10 o'clock that evening. The parking lot was mostly empty, and my footsteps echoed off the concrete as I walked to my car. The night air was crisp and clear, a stark contrast to the suffocating atmosphere of secrets and lies I'd been breathing all day. When I got home, Damon's car wasn't in the driveway. The house was dark and silent, which was unusual. In 25 years of marriage, Damon had never stayed out all night without telling me where he was going. I let myself in and turned on the lights. Everything looked exactly the same as it had that morning. The same furniture, the same photographs on the walls, the same coffee mugs in the sink from breakfast, but it all felt different now, like I was seeing it through someone else's eyes. On the kitchen counter, I found a note written in Damon's familiar handwriting. "Had to take care of some things. Back tomorrow. We'll talk then. I love you." I crumpled up the note and threw it in the trash. Then I went upstairs to our bedroom and began looking through his things with new eyes. In his dresser drawer, beneath his usual collection of socks and underwear, I found a small key I'd never seen before. It was attached to a keychain from a bank I didn't recognize. First National of Denver, one of the cities he traveled to regularly. I sat on our bed, holding that key and thinking about everything Linda had told me. 3 families, 3 identities, multiple bank accounts. How long had I been living with a stranger? My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was an unknown number, but this time I answered immediately. "Mrs. Morrison? This is Sarah." The voice was the same one from the airport, but calmer now, more controlled. "I heard you met my mother today." "Your mother?" "Linda Morrison. Or I guess she's Linda Walsh now, since that's probably not her real married name either." I closed my eyes. Even the names were lies. "I need to see you," Sarah continued. "There are things you need to know before he comes home. Things that will help you protect yourself." "Tomorrow morning," I said. "The coffee shop." "Actually, I was thinking tonight. Can you meet me at Riverside Park in an hour? The parking lot by the boat launch. It's more private." Every instinct I had told me not to meet a stranger in a dark park at night. But Sarah wasn't really a stranger anymore. She was the daughter my husband had never told me about, the one who'd risked everything to warn me about the truth. "I'll be there," I said. An hour later, I was sitting in my car in the empty parking lot by the Potomac River. The water was black and still, reflecting the lights from the city across the river. I could hear the gentle lapping of waves against the shore and the distant hum of traffic from the George Washington Parkway. A small sedan pulled up beside me, and a young woman got out. Even in the dim light from the parking lot lamps, I could see that she looked exactly like the girl from the airport, but cleaned up. Her hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she wore jeans and a Georgetown University sweatshirt. She got into my passenger seat without ceremony. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I know this is all incredibly overwhelming." That's an understatement. Sarah pulled a thick folder from her backpack and handed it to me. "Everything is in here. Bank records, property deeds, marriage certificates, birth certificates for me and my brother, and evidence of the third family." I opened the folder with trembling hands. The first document was a marriage certificate dated 15 years ago, Damon Morrison and Linda Walsh. The second was a marriage certificate dated 8 years ago, David Morrison and Elena Vasquez. David Morrison, not Damon. Another identity entirely. "Elena lives in Phoenix," Sarah explained. "She has twin boys who are 7 years old. She thinks her husband is a traveling medical equipment salesman named David, who lost his first wife to cancer." I felt like I was going to be sick. "How did you find all this?" "I'm a computer science major," Sarah said simply. "And I've always known something was wrong with my father. The way he would disappear, the way he never talked about his past, the way he always paid for everything in cash. So I started digging. I flipped through the documents, each one revealing another layer of deception. Bank accounts in 3 different states, property holdings I'd never heard of, credit cards and names I didn't recognize. He's been systematically draining money from all 3 families," Sarah continued, "moving it into offshore accounts. My mother thinks they have $20,000 in savings, but their account actually only has $800 in it." "What about Elena?" "She's in the worst position. Her twins are sick. They have a genetic condition that requires expensive medical treatment. She's been taking out loans against their house because she thinks her husband's income isn't enough to cover the costs. But really, he's been taking her money too." I thought about my own bank account, the joint account Damon had insisted we set up years ago. How much had he been taking from me? "There's something else," Sarah said quietly. "He's planning to leave. All of us. There's a plane ticket in his real name. His actual legal name is Daniel Morris, for a flight to Costa Rica next week. One way." The folder slipped from my hands, scattering papers across my lap. "Next week? Tuesday. Which is why I had to warn you today. If you had gone on that Hawaii trip with him, you might never have come back." I stared out at the dark river, trying to process everything. 25 years of marriage, and it had all been a lie. Not just an affair or a moment of weakness, but an elaborate, calculated deception involving multiple identities and families. "What do we do?" I asked. Sarah's jaw tightened, and for a moment she looked much older than her 20 years. "We stop him," she said, "before he destroys any more lives." I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table until dawn, spreading out all the documents Sarah had given me like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. Each paper revealed another fragment of my husband's deception, another life built on lies. By the time the sun came up, I had a clear picture of what Daniel Morris, the man I knew as Damon Morrison, had been doing for the past 15 years. It was worse than I had imagined. He hadn't just been living a double life. He had been systematically destroying 3 families while building himself an escape plan. The bank statements showed a pattern that made my stomach turn. Regular transfers from accounts in my name, Linda's name, and Elena's name, all flowing into a central account in the Cayman Islands. Small amounts at first, $200 here, $500 there, but growing larger over time as he became more confident that none of us were paying attention. From my account alone, he had stolen over $87,000 over the past 5 years. I made coffee with hands that wouldn't stop shaking and tried to figure out what to do next. Call the police? Confront him directly? Run away and let someone else deal with this mess? But then I thought about Linda, believing her husband was dead or dying in a hospital bed. I thought about Elena in Phoenix, probably taking out another loan to pay for her son's medical treatments, while her husband was stealing money that could save them. I thought about Sarah, a 20-year-old girl who had uncovered this massive deception because the adults in her life had failed to protect her. I couldn't run away. Not when other people were still being hurt. My phone rang just after 7 in the morning. It was Damon. "Gretchen, thank God. I've been worried sick. Where did you go last night?" His voice sounded normal, concerned, loving. The same voice that had told me he loved me every morning for 25 years. The same voice that had lied to me about everything that mattered. "I needed some time to think," I said, keeping my own voice carefully neutral. "About what happened at the hospital? Look, I know it was confusing, but I've been doing some research. Identity theft is more common than you think, especially with people in sales who travel a lot. Someone must have gotten hold of my personal information and—" "Stop," I said quietly. He paused. "Stop what?" "Stop lying to me. I know about Linda. I know about Elena. I know about the bank accounts and the plane ticket to Costa Rica." The silence that followed was so complete I wondered if he had hung up. But I could hear his breathing on the other end of the line, shallow and rapid. "I don't know what you're talking about," he finally said, but his voice had lost its confident tone. "Daniel Morris," I said, using his real name for the first time. "That's who you really are, isn't it? Not Damon Morrison. That's just one of your identities." Another long silence. When he spoke again, his voice was different, harder, more calculating. "Who have you been talking to? People who deserve the truth, just like I do. Gretchen, you don't understand. It's complicated. There are reasons—" "I understand perfectly," I interrupted. "You've been running a con for 15 years. 3 wives, probably more children than I know about, and bank accounts full of stolen money. What I don't understand is how you thought you could get away with it forever." "I never meant for it to go this far," he said, and for the first time he sounded genuinely remorseful. "It started as just survival. After my first marriage fell apart, I was desperate. I needed money. I needed a fresh start. The identity thing was supposed to be temporary. 15 years is not temporary. I know it got out of hand. But Gretchen, I do love you. Whatever else you believe, please believe that." I almost laughed. "You love my bank account. You love having a stable home base between your other lives. But you don't love me, Daniel. You don't even know me." "That's not true. We have 25 years together. That has to count for something. We have 25 years of you lying to me. That's what we have." I could hear him moving around, probably pacing the way he did when he was nervous. I wondered where he was calling from. The hotel he was supposedly staying in? One of his other homes? Maybe he was sitting in Elena's kitchen right now, having this conversation while she got their sons ready for school. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "I want you to turn yourself in. I want you to return the money you've stolen. I want you to stop hurting people. And if I don't, then Sarah, Linda, Elena, and I will do it for you. We have all the evidence, Daniel. Bank records, property deeds, documentation of every lie you've told. You can end this quietly, or we can make it very public. Your choice." He was quiet for so long that I thought the call had dropped. But then he spoke, and his voice was cold in a way I had never heard before. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, Gretchen. You think this is just about money? You think you can threaten me and I'll just roll over? I think you're a coward who preys on women who trust you, and I think your time is up. Be very careful," he said, each word deliberate and sharp. "You don't want to make an enemy of me." The line went dead. I sat there staring at my phone, my heart pounding. In 25 years, Damon had never threatened me. He had manipulated me, lied to me, stolen from me, but he had never been directly menacing. But then again, I had never posed a real threat to his carefully constructed world before. I called Sarah immediately. "He knows. I said when she answered. I confronted him and he knows we have evidence. What did he say? He threatened me. Not directly, but it was clear enough. We need to move faster then, Sarah said. Can you meet me this morning? I want to show you something else I found. An hour later, we met at a small diner in Alexandria, far enough from Arlington that I was unlikely to run into anyone I knew. Sarah looked tired, like she hadn't slept either, but her eyes were bright with determination. I've been thinking about this all night, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. The plane ticket to Costa Rica isn't his only exit strategy. Look at this. She opened her laptop and showed me a real estate website. There was a listing for a small house in Costa Rica, already purchased, already furnished. The buyer was listed as D. Morris. He's been planning this for at least 2 years, Sarah said. This house was bought with money from all 3 families. Your money, my mother's money, Elena's money. He's built himself a retirement fund by stealing from the people who loved him. I stared at the photos of the house. It was beautiful, with white walls and red tile roofs, surrounded by tropical gardens. It looked like paradise. A paradise built on lies and theft. There's more, Sarah continued, clicking to another screen. I tracked down his flight information. He's not flying alone. My blood ran cold. Who is he traveling with? A woman named Maria Santos. She works at a bank in Miami. I think she might be family number 4. The betrayal hit me all over again, fresh and sharp. Even now, while his other wives were dealing with the aftermath of his deceptions, he was planning a future with someone else entirely. How do we stop him? I asked. Sarah closed her laptop and leaned forward. We need to get to the bank accounts before he does. If he's planning to leave Tuesday, he'll probably try to clean out whatever money is left on Monday. How do we do that? We report the theft to the authorities, but we need to be strategic about it. If we just go to the local police, he might be able to talk his way out of it or delay things long enough to escape. What do you suggest? My uncle works for the FBI. He specializes in financial crimes. If I can get him to look at this evidence, he can freeze the accounts and issue warrants before Daniel knows what's happening. I nodded slowly. The idea of involving federal law enforcement was terrifying, but it was also the only way to ensure that Daniel couldn't hurt anyone else. There's something else we need to consider, Sarah said, her voice dropping lower. My mother doesn't know about Elena yet, and Elena doesn't know about either of you. We need to decide whether to tell them before we involve the authorities, or let them find out when everything becomes public. I thought about Linda, already devastated by the discovery of my existence. How would she handle learning about a third wife? And what about Elena, dealing with her sick children while her husband lived a lie? They deserve to know, I said finally. Before this gets out of hand, they deserve to hear it from us, rather than from strangers. Sarah nodded. I thought you'd say that. I've already reached out to Elena. She thinks I'm a journalist doing a story about medical equipment sales. I'm supposed to call her this afternoon. And Linda? She knows I was meeting with you. She's waiting to hear what we decided to do. I looked out the window of the diner, watching normal people go about their normal lives. A woman walking her dog. An elderly man reading a newspaper on a bench. A young couple holding hands as they crossed the street. I envied them their normalcy, their ability to trust that their lives were real and stable. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. For the first time in 25 years, I knew exactly what I was dealing with. The lies were over, even if the truth was devastating. Let's do it, I said. All of it. Contact your uncle. Tell Elena the truth. Prepare Linda for what's coming. Let's end this. Sarah smiled, and for a moment she looked exactly like her father. Not the lying, manipulative Daniel Morris, but the charming, confident man I had fallen in love with 25 years ago. He chose the wrong families to mess with, she said. He thought we were all weak, isolated, easy targets, but he was wrong. I raised my coffee cup in a mock toast. To choosing the unexpected. Sarah clinked her cup against mine. To getting our lives back. As we sat there planning Daniel's downfall, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not for reconciliation or forgiveness, but for justice. for the chance to protect other women from the man who had stolen so much from so many. Daniel Morris thought he was going to disappear to his paradise in Costa Rica. But we were about to show him that some choices have consequences he never saw coming. The unexpected choice wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to all of us, Sarah, Linda, Elena, and me. And we were choosing to fight back. The next 48 hours moved like a carefully orchestrated dance of revelation and preparation. Sarah's uncle, FBI agent Robert Chen, took one look at our evidence and immediately understood the scope of what we were dealing with. "This isn't just bigamy or identity theft," he said when we met at his office in downtown D.C. "This is systematic financial fraud across multiple states. We're looking at federal wire fraud, money laundering, and possibly tax evasion." Agent Chen was a serious man in his 50s with graying hair and eyes that missed nothing. He spread our documents across his desk like he was solving a complex puzzle. "The good news is that we can move quickly," he continued. "With this much evidence, I can get warrants to freeze his accounts within hours. The bad news is that once we start this process, there's no going back. Everyone involved becomes part of a federal investigation." I looked at Sarah, who sat beside me taking notes in a small notebook. She had been my anchor through all of this, the steady voice of reason when everything else felt like chaos. "What about the other wives?" I asked. "Linda and Elena? They'll be interviewed as victims, but they'll also need to provide testimony. It could take months to sort through all the financial records and figure out exactly how much money was stolen from each family." "And Daniel?" Agent Chen's expression hardened. "If he tries to leave the country Tuesday as planned, he'll be arrested at the airport. If he doesn't show up for that flight, we'll issue a federal warrant and bring him in wherever he is." After leaving the FBI office, Sarah and I drove to a small cafe in Georgetown where Linda was waiting for us. She looked like she had aged 10 years in the past 3 days. Her blonde hair hung limp around her face, and there were dark circles under her eyes. "How did it go?" she asked as we sat down. "It's happening," Sarah said gently. "Uncle Robert is filing the paperwork today. By tomorrow morning, all of Daniel's accounts will be frozen." Linda nodded slowly. "And Elena?" This was the conversation I had been dreading. The night before, Sarah had finally reached Elena Vasquez in Phoenix and told her the truth about her husband's other families. According to Sarah, Elena had hung up 3 times before finally staying on the line long enough to hear the whole story. "She's flying here tonight," Sarah said. "She wants to meet all of us before the FBI gets involved." "How is she handling it?" Sarah exchanged a glance with me. "About as well as you'd expect. She's angry, confused, and scared. Her twins are supposed to start a new treatment program next week that costs $15,000. She was planning to use money from their joint savings account, but now she knows that account is probably empty." Linda put her face in her hands. "Those poor children. The FBI says they'll work to recover as much stolen money as possible," I said. "But it could take time." "Time those kids don't have," Linda said bitterly. We sat in silence for a few minutes, each lost in our own thoughts. Around us, the cafe buzzed with normal afternoon activity. Students working on laptops, business people having meetings, couples sharing dessert, life continuing as usual while our world fell apart. "I keep thinking about all the signs I missed," Linda said finally. "The way he never wanted me to answer the phone when he was home. How he always insisted on doing the taxes himself. The fact that he paid for everything in cash and never wanted to use credit cards. We all missed signs," I said. "That's what he counted on. He was very good at making each of us feel like we were the only one who mattered." 20 years, Linda whispered. "I gave him 20 years of my life, and it was all a lie." Sarah reached across the table and took her mother's hand. "Not all of it, Mom. Michael and I are real. Your love for us is real. The life you built for us is real. He can't take that away." I watched this exchange between mother and daughter and felt a stab of envy. Sarah was strong, supportive, loyal, everything you'd want in a child. I had never had children with Damon, partly because he always said we should wait until his career was more stable. Now I wondered if that was just another lie, another way to keep his different lives separate. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Tonight. 8 p.m. Riverside Park where you met Sarah. Come alone or people will get hurt." I showed the message to Sarah and Linda. Sarah's face went pale. "That's him," she said. "That's his number from the Phoenix phone. He's threatening us now," Linda said, her voice shaking. I felt a cold anger settle in my chest. For 25 years, I had been afraid of disappointing Damon, afraid of not being good enough, afraid of losing his love. But now I knew his love had never been real, and I wasn't afraid anymore. "I'm going," I said. "No," Sarah said immediately. "It's too dangerous. We should call Uncle Robert. If I don't show up, he might run tonight instead of waiting until Tuesday. We need to keep him thinking he still has control until the FBI can act." "Then I'm coming with you," Sarah said. "Absolutely not. I won't put you at risk." We argued about it for another 20 minutes before I finally convinced them that I needed to handle this myself. Sarah gave me a small recording device that looked like a pen, and Linda made me promise to call them the moment the meeting was over. At 7:30 that evening, I was sitting in my car in the same parking lot where Sarah had revealed the truth about her father just days before. The sun was setting over the Potomac River, casting long shadows across the water. A few joggers ran past on the trail, but otherwise the area was quiet. At exactly 8 o'clock, a familiar sedan pulled up next to me. But when the driver got out, I barely recognized him. Daniel looked like he had been sleeping in his car for days. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled, his face unshaven, but his eyes were the same, calculating, manipulative, searching for an angle. He got into my passenger seat without being invited, just like Sarah had done a few nights before. But where Sarah's presence had felt like salvation, Daniel's felt like a threat. "You look good, Gretchen," he said, as if this were a normal social meeting. "I've missed you." "Cut the act, Daniel. What do you want?" He sighed dramatically. "I want my wife back. I want us to work through this together." "Which wife? You have several to choose from." His jaw tightened. "You're the only one who matters. Linda, Elena, they were mistakes, complications. You're the one I actually love." "Love?" I couldn't keep the disgust out of my voice. "You stole almost $90,000 from me. You lied about everything for 15 years. You threatened me on the phone. That's not love, Daniel. That's abuse. I can explain all of that. The money, the other families. It got out of hand. But I never meant for it to hurt you." "Then why are you running away to Costa Rica with another woman?" For the first time, he looked genuinely surprised. "How did you—" He stopped himself, then laughed bitterly. "Sarah, my brilliant daughter. I always knew she was too smart for her own good. She's protecting her family, something you never did." Daniel was quiet for a moment, staring out at the darkening river. When he spoke again, his voice was different, quieter, more vulnerable. "Do you know what it's like to feel trapped in your own life? To wake up every morning and realize you've made choices that you can't take back? Is that supposed to make me feel sorry for you? No. It's supposed to help you understand why I made the choices I did. After my real first marriage fell apart, and yes, there was a real first marriage before you. I was broke, desperate, living in my car. When I met you, you were successful, stable, everything I needed to get back on my feet. So you used me. At first, yes, but then I fell in love with you, really fell in love. And I wanted to be the man you deserved, but I didn't know how to become that man without lying about who I really was. And Linda? Elena? Were they just more lies?" He rubbed his face with both hands. "Linda happened because I was traveling so much for work, and I was lonely. I told myself it was just temporary, just until I figured out how to be honest with you. But then she got pregnant with Michael, and suddenly I had another family depending on me. And Elena? Elena was—" He trailed off, then shook his head. "Elena was me trying to start over again. I thought if I could create one honest relationship, maybe I could figure out how to fix the others. By lying to her too, by being someone different with her. David Morrison was going to be the man Daniel Morris never learned how to be. I stared at him, this stranger who had shared my bed for 25 years. And Maria? Your Costa Rica girlfriend? Maria knows the truth. About all of it. She's the only person who knows who I really am. And she loves me anyway. The casual way he said it felt like a physical blow. After everything, all the lies, all the stolen money, all the broken lives, he had found someone who accepted him completely, while the rest of us had loved illusions. You're really going to leave all of us, I said. Your children, your families, everyone who depended on you. What's the alternative? Stay here and go to prison? Try to make amends that will take the rest of my life to complete? Destroy what's left of my relationship with Sarah and Michael? Take responsibility. For once in your life, take responsibility for what you've done. Daniel turned to look at me directly, and for a moment I saw a flash of the man I had married. Charming, persuasive, dangerously appealing. Come with me, he said quietly. What? Come with me to Costa Rica. We can start over, do it right this time. No lies, no other families, just us. I almost laughed at the audacity of it. You want me to run away with you after everything you've done? I want us to have a chance at something real. 25 years, Gretchen. That has to count for something. It counts as 25 years of lies. Not all of it was lies. The way I felt about you, the life we built together, that was real. For just a moment, I felt a flicker of the old temptation. The desire to believe him, to find a way to make this work, to salvage something from the wreckage of our marriage. But then I thought about Sarah, risking everything to protect the people she loved. I thought about Linda, betrayed and abandoned with 2 children to raise. I thought about Elena and her sick twins, struggling to pay for medical care while their father stole their money. No, I said firmly. I'm not running away with you. I'm not enabling your lies anymore. Daniel's expression hardened again. Then you're making a mistake, a big one. Is that another threat? It's a warning. If you go through with this FBI thing, if you try to destroy me, I will make sure you regret it. I know things about you, Gretchen. Things that could ruin your reputation, your career, your life. I almost asked what he meant, but then I realized it didn't matter. Whatever secrets he thought he had, whatever leverage he imagined he held over me, it was just another form of manipulation. Go ahead, I said. Do your worst. I'm done being afraid of you. He stared at me for a long moment, then got out of the car without another word. As he drove away, I sat there in the growing darkness, my heart pounding with adrenaline and something else, something that felt like freedom. I called Sarah immediately. It's done, I said when she answered. He's running scared, but he's not backing down. Tomorrow, we end this. The next morning, Agent Chen called to tell us that Daniel Morris had been arrested at Dulles Airport, trying to board an early flight to Costa Rica. Maria Santos had been with him, and both of them were in federal custody. The web of lies that had taken 15 years to build had finally unraveled completely, but the real work of rebuilding our lives was just beginning. 6 months later, I was sitting in a small cafe in Old Town Alexandria, watching Elena play with her 7-year-old twins in the courtyard outside. The boys were healthy now, their medical treatments fully covered by the money the FBI had recovered from Daniel's offshore accounts. Their laughter carried through the open windows, mixing with the gentle hum of afternoon conversation. Linda sat across from me, looking more like herself than she had in years. She had cut her hair shorter and was wearing a bright blue dress that brought out her eyes. The haunted look she'd carried for months was finally starting to fade. The divorce is final next week, she said, stirring sugar into her coffee. 20 years of marriage, officially over. How are you feeling about it? She considered the question seriously, relieved mostly, and grateful that I found out when I did. Sarah calculated that if Daniel had succeeded in his plan, he would have left me with over $40,000 in debt and no way to pay for Michael's senior year of college. I nodded, understanding completely. The financial recovery had been more successful than Agent Chen had initially predicted. Daniel had been sloppy with his money laundering, making it relatively easy for federal investigators to trace the stolen funds. Between my accounts, Linda's accounts, and Elena's accounts, we had recovered almost $300,000 that he had stolen over the years. But money was only part of the healing process. "Have you heard from him?" Linda asked quietly. "Once. A letter from his lawyer asking me to visit him in prison." I shook my head. I threw it away without reading past the first paragraph. Daniel Morris, I still had trouble thinking of him by his real name, had been sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for wire fraud, money laundering, and bigamy. His lawyer had tried to argue for a lighter sentence based on his cooperation with authorities, but the judge had been unimpressed by a man who had systematically betrayed 3 families for over a decade. The sentencing had been surreal. I sat in the courtroom between Linda and Elena, watching this man who had dominated our lives for so many years reduced to an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. When the judge asked if he had anything to say before sentencing, Daniel had stood up and delivered what sounded like a rehearsed speech about taking responsibility for his actions. But he never once looked at any of us. Even at the end, he couldn't face what he had done to the people who had loved him. "Sarah got accepted to Georgetown Law School," Linda said, changing the subject to something more pleasant. "That's wonderful. She'll make an excellent lawyer. She wants to specialize in financial crimes, helping victims of fraud. I think this whole experience gave her a sense of purpose." I smiled, thinking about the young woman who had warned me at the airport all those months ago. Sarah had testified at Daniel's trial with a composure that impressed even the federal prosecutors. She had presented her evidence clearly and methodically, showing exactly how her father had built his web of lies and how it had affected each of his victims. But more than that, she had become the heart of our unlikely family of survivors. It was Sarah who organized our monthly dinners. Sarah who made sure Elena's boys had Christmas presents when money was still tight. Sarah who helped me figure out how to rebuild my credit after Daniel's theft. "What about Michael?" I asked. "How is he handling all this?" Linda's expression grew more serious. "Better than I expected, actually. He was angry for a long time. At his father, at me for not seeing the truth sooner, at the whole situation. But he's been going to counseling, and I think it's helping." Michael had been the family member most devastated by the revelations about Daniel. At 17, he was old enough to understand the scope of his father's betrayal, but young enough to feel personally abandoned by it. He had spent several months refusing to talk to anyone about the situation, throwing himself into school and sports as a way to avoid dealing with the emotional fallout. But gradually, with the help of therapy and the support of his sister and mother, he had started to process what had happened. The last time I saw him, he had even asked thoughtful questions about my experience, trying to understand how his father had managed to deceive so many people for so long. "And Elena?" I asked. "She's doing well. Better than well, actually. Did you know she went back to school?" I hadn't known that. Elena and I had developed a cordial relationship over the month since Daniel's arrest, but we weren't as close as Linda and I had become. The trauma of discovering her husband's other families had affected her differently. She had withdrawn from most social contact while focusing intensely on her children's needs. "Nursing school," Linda continued. "She says she wants to help other people the way the medical staff helped her boys. And she's been dating someone new, a pediatrician at the hospital where the twins receive their treatments. Good for her." Elena deserved happiness after everything Daniel had put her through. Of all of us, she had perhaps suffered the most practical consequences from his deception. While Linda and I had been hurt emotionally and financially, Elena had been caring for seriously ill children while believing she couldn't afford proper medical care. The stress of that situation had nearly broken her, but she had also shown remarkable strength once she learned the truth. Instead of falling apart, she had channeled her anger into action, working with Sarah and the FBI to uncover additional evidence of Daniel's crimes. It was Elena who discovered that Daniel had been using her son's social security numbers to open credit cards, adding identity theft to his list of charges. "What about you?" Linda asked, turning the conversation back to me. "Any regrets about not taking that trip to Costa Rica with him?" I almost choked on my coffee. Are you serious? She laughed. I'm kidding. But I mean it. Any regrets about how things turned out? I considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, I had been living a comfortable lie, married to a man I thought I knew, building a future based on false foundations. Now, I was 57 years old, divorced, starting over in many ways. But I was also free, no regrets, I said finally. For the first time in 25 years, I know exactly who I am and what I want. That's worth more than any comfortable lie. It was true. The months since Daniel's arrest had been difficult in many ways, dealing with lawyers, testifying in court, rebuilding my finances, learning to live alone again, but they had also been liberating. I had sold the house in Arlington, the one where Daniel and I had built our fake life together. Too many memories, too many reminders of the lies I had lived with for so long. Instead, I bought a small townhouse in Georgetown, close enough to Sarah's university that she could visit easily, but far enough from my old neighborhood that I wouldn't constantly run into people who wanted to gossip about my situation. I had also made changes in other areas of my life. For years, Daniel had subtly discouraged me from maintaining close friendships, always finding reasons why we couldn't attend social events or why I shouldn't spend too much time with other people. Now, I realized that isolation had been part of his strategy, keeping me dependent on him for social connection and emotional support. So I had started reaching out to old friends, rebuilding relationships that had withered during my marriage. I had joined a book club, started volunteering at a literacy program, even signed up for painting classes at the community college. Small steps, but important ones in reclaiming the person I had been before Daniel Morris entered my life. I have something to tell you, Linda said, her voice taking on a more serious tone. I'm thinking about moving. Moving? Where? Portland, Oregon. My sister lives there, and she's been asking me to relocate for years. With Michael starting college in the fall and Sarah settled here in D.C., this might be the perfect time for a fresh start. I felt a pang of sadness at the thought of Linda moving so far away. Over the past 6 months, she had become one of my closest friends. We understood each other in a way that other people couldn't. We had shared the unique experience of discovering that our entire adult lives had been built on lies. When? I asked. This summer, probably. I've already started looking at jobs there. I'll miss you. I'll miss you too. But Portland isn't that far. And you could always visit. She was right, of course, and I understood her desire for a complete fresh start. Sometimes the only way to heal from trauma is to remove yourself entirely from the environment where it occurred. But her announcement made me think about my own future in a new way. For months, I had been focused on recovery, healing from the betrayal, rebuilding my finances, processing the emotional impact of Daniel's deception. But what came next? What did I want the rest of my life to look like? That evening, I sat on the small balcony of my Georgetown townhouse, watching the sun set over the Potomac River, the same river where I had met Sarah all those months ago, where she had handed me the folder that changed everything. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Sarah. "Are you watching the news?" she asked without preamble. "No. Why?" "Turn on Channel 7. There's a story about Dad's sentencing appeal being denied." I picked up the remote and found the local news station. Sure enough, there was a brief segment about Daniel's case, complete with file footage from his original sentencing. The reporter mentioned that Morris had attempted to appeal his conviction on technical grounds, but that the federal appeals court had upheld the original sentence. 8 years, no possibility of early release, the reporter concluded. Morris will remain in federal custody until 2032. I turned off the television and called Sarah back. "How are you feeling about it?" I asked. Relieved, mostly. I was worried they might reduce his sentence or find some technicality to let him out early. And now? Now I know he's really gone. For 8 years at least, none of us have to worry about him showing up and trying to manipulate us again. Sarah was quiet for a moment, and I could hear the sounds of campus life in the background, students talking, cars passing, the normal rhythms of a university evening. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. Of course. See, do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't warned you at the airport that day? If you had gone on that Hawaii trip with him? I had wondered about that many times over the past 6 months. If Sarah hadn't found the courage to approach a stranger with an impossible warning, if I hadn't chosen to believe her, if I hadn't decided to answer that phone call from the hospital, I think he would have convinced me to sign those power of attorney papers, I said. And then he would have cleaned out our accounts and disappeared, just like he planned. I probably would never have known about you and Michael and your mother. I would have spent the rest of my life wondering what had happened to my husband. I'm glad I stopped you. So am I. You saved my life, Sarah. All of our lives. No, she said firmly. You saved yourself. I just gave you information. You're the one who chose to act on it. She was right about that, too. The girl at the airport had warned me about a choice, and when that choice came, when the phone rang with news that should have been impossible, I had chosen to believe the unexpected rather than accept the comfortable lie. It was the most important decision I had ever made. After saying goodbye to Sarah, I remained on my balcony as darkness settled over the city. In the distance, I could see the lights of Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, where this whole journey had begun. Somewhere out there, planes were taking off and landing, carrying people toward new destinations, new possibilities, new choices. Tomorrow, I had a job interview at a nonprofit organization that helped victims of financial fraud. The position would use my background in education to develop programs for people rebuilding their lives after economic abuse. It wasn't something I had ever imagined myself doing, but the work felt important, meaningful in a way my previous career never had. If I got the job, I would be helping other people navigate the aftermath of betrayal and deception. I would be turning my own painful experience into something that could benefit others. It seemed like the right next choice to make. I thought about Daniel, sitting in a federal prison cell, probably still convinced that he was the victim of circumstances beyond his control. He would never understand that his downfall hadn't been caused by bad luck or unfair treatment. It had been caused by the choices he made, day after day, year after year, just as my freedom had been caused by the choice I made to finally stop accepting his lies. The girl at the airport had been right about one thing. When the moment came, I would have a choice. And I had chosen the unexpected, chosen the truth, chosen myself. For the first time in 25 years, I was exactly where I belonged. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.